Welcome to the Elevate Media Podcast with your host, Chris Anderson. In this show, Chris and his guests will share their knowledge and experience on how to go from zero to successful entrepreneur. They have built their businesses from scratch and are now ready to give back to those who are just starting. Let's get ready to learn, grow, and elevate our businesses. And now, your host, Chris Anderson.
Welcome back to another recording of the Elevate Media Podcast. I am Chris Anderson, your host, and today we're going to be diving into the topic of mindset and how to improve that along our journey. So today we brought on Adrian Knight, and he's going to help us with his expertise within the field of mindset. So Adrian, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here. It really is.
Yeah, super excited to have you here. Thanks for taking some time out. So we're going to dive right into it. And we're going to kind of take a direction that's not necessarily always thought of when we're talking about mindset. But I want to know, what is something that within the field of mindset, within the community of mindset coaches or consultants or guides, that what is one thing within that you do not necessarily agree with?
It's such a good question. You never hear that, you never hear the question from that angle. Yeah, there is a lot of talk around habits at the moment. It's been popularized largely by James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which is a fantastic book. Highly recommend it. And the information in there is very valid. But what I don't quite agree with, which I don't think is spoken about as much, is that from my personal experience, change has been instantaneous in many cases. It's been reaching a decision that was so definitive, it was so decisive that change happened in that moment. And then from that moment moving forward, that was when you were sort of going through the motions and like change had already happened, but it was the rollout, like the evolution of that change coming up. And I think that it's an important point to highlight, because change is scary for a lot of people. A lot of people are sort of scared of the uncertainty, and rightfully so. And when thinking about making a change, they tend to think in like protracted, like extent. So it's going to take weeks or even months or maybe even longer. But I would suggest that actually change is a lot quicker. And if you really really adamant you're going to make a change, then I would suggest that it's almost instantaneous.
So what do you think people do struggle with that change not being so quick? Why do you think it takes them so long to make that change fully in their lives?
I think the thought of change is a lot scarier than the change themselves. It's funny because I was talking about this morning, like very often that build up, the lead up to making a decision that's going to involve change is very often the worst bit. And actually, if we were to just move through that period a lot quicker, we would get to the other side. And I'm certainly not suggesting that there's not going to be, any uncertainty, or it's not going to be, sort of comfortable. Like change can be uncomfortable, but I think the most uncomfortable part is sort of the build up in our mind. And if people can just sort of push past that, push past that a little bit quicker, I think they'll find themselves making much more positive changes in their life and be far more happier for it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we overcomplicate in our minds what it takes to change or what it takes to grow or what it takes to succeed. And that kind of hinders, like you said, because of the fear of that. So how can someone, improve their mindset so that fear might not hinder them as much when they're trying to make these changes within whatever it is in their lives? How can they go about strengthening that mindset?
It's a great question. And I think it comes down to prioritizing yourself. A lot of people tend to put themselves at the end of the queue. They will look after everybody else. They will wake up in the morning, they'll go straight into dad mode or mum mode and then work mode. And it won't be towards the end of the day where they've actually taken some time for themselves. I used to do that personally, and it didn't put me in a very good place. And it was only when I started to make some changes in my life, where I started to spend the first part of my day focused on me and essentially investing in myself. So getting up a little bit earlier and reading, for example, and doing a number of other sort of self-improvement activities, not looking at my phone, not going onto social media. That helped my mindset significantly. But what I found almost by, to my great surprise, was that I was going into my day, I was then going into dad mode, then going into work mode as a much higher version of myself, a much sort of, elevated version of myself. And I found myself being able to see things more clearer. I found myself having more confidence, and I found myself just having the courage to make changes that previously I knew I needed to make, but just couldn't quite muster that energy. And it all came because I just gave to myself first before everyone else. And it's that old saying that sometimes you just have to be a little bit selfish to then be selfless. And it's been very true.
Yeah. So how did you go about making that change? Getting up earlier sometimes isn't the easiest thing, especially when you're on a certain routine. So what steps did you take, or how did you, was it an instant change for you in that instant of, I'm going to get up early, so boom, the next day I got up early to start self-improvement, or did it take a little bit longer?
Well, yeah, so it was an instant change in the sense, but there was a build up to that instant change. So I was actually in a fairly dark place. I was waking up at sort of 2:30, 3 in the morning with severe anxiety and panic attacks, like waking up in just utter dread. And I was convinced that everything was ending, like the world was literally caving in. And it would take me around an hour and a half to sort of get to a place mentally and emotionally where I was sort of almost talking myself down from the ledge, okay, it's not as bad as it seemed. But I was still in bed. That just got something severe that it forced me to go and see a therapist, because I just knew a change needed to happen. And he was the one who suggested that it's ridiculous, this lifestyle that I'm sort of living as an entrepreneur, like waking up early and straight into emails and straight into dad mode and straight into just like all of the excitement and chaos of running this small business. He's like, you need to get to yourself first. And that was when the change happened for me. I instantly recognized that's truth. And so I started by just getting up 30 minutes earlier. It was nothing major, but just 30 minutes. And I would get up, make a cup of tea, say hello to my dog and my cat, sit down and just read. And in a very short period, I noticed my well-being starting to increase. So much so, and I had a bit of a taste for it. I was like, you know what, I'm going to get up 45 minutes earlier, just like another 15 minutes. But this time I'm going to read and then meditate for 15 minutes. And it just kind of escalated from there. But I started to notice these knock-on effects. So I was going into my day feeling better, feeling more confident, feeling more clearer on what I needed to do. And again, in a very short period, I started to look at what I was actually doing, thinking, this is ridiculous. Like, why am I even doing that? And it just gave a level of clarity, and it just became such a good feeling that I got to a place, and I'm still there now, where I go to bed at night genuinely excited about waking up in the morning. And I get up a lot earlier now. I get up at 4 a.m. I'm not suggesting everyone does that, because I appreciate that's not for everyone. But I spend the first 3 hours of my day focused on me.
That's awesome.
Reading, meditating.
And with that, how many hours of sleep do you get?
I get 6 to 7 hours.
Okay.
So
you get to bed a little bit earlier. You don't stay up late either.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
No, yeah, I get to bed earlier. I always make sure I have a cutoff So because I like to get up early anyway, I noticed that I'm most productive in the morning. I start to tail off mid-afternoon, and so I manage my day and my tasks accordingly. So I'd always make sure I'm dealing with admin type stuff towards the end of the day. I'd always make sure my important phone calls or the important tasks are done in the morning, and so I tail off quite naturally. And yeah, it's worked. It's worked really well.
So, and you said earlier that you were the start to all this was you were waking up, early in the morning for an hour or so, just in bed, anxiety, panic attack type stuff, like thoughts going through your head. Why was that? Like, did you ever figure out why you were having, or what was causing those anxiety ridden stints when you would wake up?
So I buy and sell companies for a living. I buy businesses, I turn them around. They're typically stressed or distressed. And I turn them around and then I sell them or I retain them. So I think at that time I had too many interests on the go, and I was spreading myself so thin. It was just overwhelming to the point where I was sort of waking up in that state, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It was just horrible. I've never felt that level of emotional just that emotional state. It really wasn't very nice. And that in itself was a great lesson for me. It was the importance of sort of focus. So I still very much buy and sell businesses, but particularly with businesses that I retain, I have a management team running those now. So I'm making sure that my focus is there and I'm not taking on too much. And I see that a lot. So many, particularly entrepreneurs will take on more than they can chew, when actually the power is in many cases doing one thing, but doing it extremely well.
Yeah. And that's a good point and way to clarify that. And I think it's good to kind of show that, we have these moments. We have anxiety as entrepreneurs, as business owners. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but you were able to recognize that and say, okay, hey, we got to make a change here. You took the steps, found help, which I think is a huge piece. If you guys are struggling with any sort of mental health, anxiety, anything, seek help. There are people out there that are willing to help, that are trained to help, and don't shy away from it. It's okay. In the world of, where we battle toxic, quote unquote, toxic masculinity and what is masculine, and finding the middle ground of still being a man and being a leader to an extent, but still being able to say, hey, listen, I need help with this. That's huge. So if you're out there listening to this, seek help. If you've listened to many episodes, you've heard my story a little bit with that. So I always like to hit down that a little bit harder when someone brings it up, because it's super important. But yeah, Adrian, with that, what are some things that you have found or that you guide people in to really fortify that mindset, so maybe they're less likely to allow anxiety or stress to kind of take over their thoughts?
So I focus on three main themes, which is exercise, nutrition, and then habits. And it's not looking at one individually, it's looking at them collectively. That for me is what's been the game changer. So exercise means many things to different people. It doesn't necessarily mean being in the gym every single day. It could be, as I say, simple, but it could be as simple as going for a 30-minute walk every day and building that into your day. That 30-minute walk is so important, or whatever that exercise is. The nutritional aspects is essentially just understanding at a very basic level your, what you're eating, and sort of how that balances across your protein and your fats. Again, it can significantly change your state of well-being. And many of us can feel this. We don't always recognize all of the depth of knowledge behind it. But if we have, too big a lunch during the week, and then we're at 3 o'clock, we're feeling tired and we need a coffee or a pick-me-up, that's because of the nutritional side. But then the habits as well. So reinforcing the right habits, those sort of high leverage habits. So creating space and bandwidth in your day, preferably in the morning before your day starts, to focus on you, whether that's reading, meditating, getting your early morning walk in, And the combination of those working together has been very powerful for me. And it's been powerful with the people who I've worked with, who like to help shape, to sort of shape how they sort of manage this part of their lives.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think those three are super critical to our well-being. And I've noticed, like, previously when I would be just on like a binge of, sugar intake and things like that, and like it would correlate, like, I'd feel more stress and more anxiety. And I think it has a direct correlation to, and, not working out as much or not moving as much, like it's such a big effect. And I think some people, like, I'm not a morning person, Adrian, Chris, I don't get up early enough. And I would say, suck it up, like, do it, because, like, so, and I know how life is, like, for everyone's busy, everyone has too much going on. And if we don't schedule that time early, like, to your point, like, just the day gets ahead of us, and like we just get, and you don't know what's going to happen. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to work out at 1 p.m. today. And, if you're working 9 to 5, your boss calls or something else happens, and it's like, oh, tomorrow I will get to it. And it's the same thing. Whereas if it can be the first stuff you do to take care of yourself, and then it's done, like, that's huge. And so I would challenge everyone, again, you're set 30 minutes earlier, right? Like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy to start, but just start getting up a little bit earlier. Sacrifice a little bit, whatever you do in the evening, so you can get up earlier the next day and really take care of yourself.
It's so true. And that 30 minutes, it could be used as simple as like sitting down and having a coffee, undisturbed, for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And the point of it is that you're taking the time for you. I've just been amazed at how little time people take for themselves, because we do have busy lives. But the knock-on effect this has is, like, there's a compound effect to it, because even if you take, say, 30 minutes and you read, a few pages of book, you have a coffee and you meditate for 10 minutes, well, your day's not fully started yet, but now you're going into your day and you've already done, you've already accomplished stuff. So if the day goes completely out the pan, if it goes like all sideways, you can look back and say, well, I've still done that for me. I've never really seen it work. Like, so people say, oh, I'm going to work out in the evening. All the reasons you say, Chris, like, it's just so easy for that not to come, or for that not to happen. And then it's like a double whammy. You didn't get the exercise in for your mindset and well-being, but simultaneously it's that knock to confidence of, oh, I said I was going to do it, but it didn't happen. Yeah. And so it's kind of like a self-defeating sort of position you put yourself in, but you do it in the morning and your phone's not really going, and like a lot of the world is still asleep, and it's just, it's just like a magical time. So.
Yeah. And Adrian and I both have kids, young kids. So that's even more crucial, is getting up before those little guys and girls are running around taking our attention, even if they're at school or whatnot. And so, as a parent, for those listening who also are parents, who are also trying to build their business, that's even more crucial, like finding that you time, because it's almost impossible during the day when you have everything else and then other people that you're responsible for. And on top of that, if you have animals like us as well, like, it just, if you don't have time for yourself, your cup is going to be empty a lot faster and not get refilled. And that's just going to cause other issues.
But I can honestly say that my relationship with my 4-year-old daughter has just gone to a depth now that I didn't really think possible previously. And to give you the extent of what my life looked like before, I was working from home and I saw my daughter for less than 1 hour a day. Like, it was so out of balance and it was so crazy. But the time I did spend with her, I was stressed. I was in the wrong place. I found myself sort of reacting to things that I shouldn't really have been doing. And I started to notice that in the way she was responding to me. But taking that time to put myself first is just, it's literally made me show up as a better dad, and I can visibly see it in how she responds. And
I was going to ask, how have you seen her change? I was going to ask that next, with that, like, because you said, when you were with her, you're stressed and you could tell. So what was that shift like? What was it like with her response to you? And then how is it different now? And is is your morning routine rubbing off on her in any way?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the last question, absolutely. So, I get up, I read, meditate, I visualize, and then I do a couple of other things, and then I go to the gym and I exercise, and I'm normally back around 7:30. And so, Evie, my daughter, the amount of times now when she's sort of like pretending and she's off to the gym and she's doing this, and it's just such a lovely thing to see it rub off, because I never force it onto her. I will never force it onto anyone in my family. I'm just doing me when I go to the gym. But to hear your sort of 4-year-old saying, "Oh, well, right, Daddy, I'm off to the gym now. I'll see you later." It's just a lovely thing, because I do sort of wonder how many other children are saying that. Because they don't do what you say, they do what you do.
Yeah.
And so it makes me feel better that the right type of impression is coming off. But yeah, our relationship has just deepened to a whole new level. She's so much more opening. Like she's very much in daddy mode at the moment. I quite often sort of come home and I find my sock and t-shirt drawer has been raided, and she's wearing my watches, and she loves daddy. And she did before, but it was a very different approach. Like daddy wasn't as fun. Daddy wasn't as understanding. If she was upset or tired, she'd always want to go to mummy. And we used to joke it was as mummy for comfort, daddy for fun. Sometimes, but now it's when she's in those states, she wants to come and just cradle up in my arms, even though she's 4. But yeah, she wants her daddy, and I feel like I feel like that sort of hero of her life, if that makes sense. And I just don't think I definitely wasn't there before, and I don't think I would be there as much necessarily if I wasn't just spending a bit of time getting myself in the right place.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And, as we're both parents, like the kids are like the biggest gifts or blessings, we can really truly have. And, everything we do, like you said, they do what we do, not what we say, especially early on. And so, yeah, for her to see you change that routine and the difference there, same with my sons, and, it's like the ultimate thing that we're doing. Like everything we do kind of is for them and reflects like in their lives. And so that's why I think taking care of our mindset is so important, because we have to be there. We got to be present. And for everyone listening who has kids, like that's like, you've got to take care of yourself for them, for the future. Like my goal is to be around I'd love to see great grandkids. Like, my kids don't get to see any of their great grandparents. And so like, it's possible to get there. It's like, what are you doing right now? It might not seem like a lot right now in the moment as you're doing it, but you've got to think, just like your business, long term, big picture. Like, what are the effects, that this is going to have down the road?
It's so true. It really is, and it's it's something I've become very insightful to, because I've used my acquisition skills to build a group of companies in the children's education space, but specifically to under 5s, because I just became aware of how impactful those first 5 years are for a child, and a lot of the stuff that we may take for granted or is completely irrelevant is actually quite a big component, and you just don't know what knock-on effect that's going to have in 10, 20, 30 years on their lives. And I mean, it's funny because I spent my whole 20s avoiding relationships and avoiding sort of in commas being tied down, because I wanted business success. Mm-hmm. But my greatest success has come after becoming a dad, because the priority shifted. It wasn't about being a success for me, it was about them, and it's just remarkable.
Yeah, it's something. It truly is a blessing, and that we've been gifted that opportunity to be parents is amazing. And so what would be, maybe people are struggling right now with everything they see on social media, in the news. How do you kind of guide people with all of that? You know, there's so much negativity out there. So how can people kind of round things out, like protect their mindset, I guess, when they have to be on social media or they have to be in the news to stay relevant to what's going on? How can they protect their mindset with all the, you know, negativity that's out there?
I would, if I could just say sort of one thing to this, it would be create space in your life, even if it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, like just start creating some space in your life. And when you do, a lot of people realize just how little they did before. But how you use that space as well is like, it's not for just sitting on social media, flicking through reels or, you know, sort of funny videos. It's like spend that time focused on you, even if it's just having a coffee and taking a breather and not having to think in a way. Like that's the place I always recommend people to start, because so few people do, especially, you know, people who have families, like they just don't do that. If you don't have families and you do have more time on your hands, look at how you're using that time. So are you using that to watch Netflix, or are you using that for you? You know, so I always feel that's the best place to start. It was definitely the place I started, and it's a place I've seen many other people start. And when people start to get into that rhythm and get a taste for giving to yourself, is actually quite nice.
Yeah.
And they start to see the impact of that it's having externally in other areas, your work, your family, finances, etc. You start to think, well, what if I gave myself a bit more time, or just invested a bit more time on myself? So that would be the place I'd always recommend people to start.
And that's a great one. Because it's funny, I think back, and I used to, and there's nothing wrong with thinking this, it's part of it, but I used to think, yeah, I can't afford to give myself 15 minutes. Like, if I give myself 15 minutes and the business is just going to collapse, it's not going to grow. That 15 minutes is crucial today to success. And so I wouldn't allow myself to have that space or that time. And, you know, eventually I was like, no, if 15 minutes collapses a business and something else is wrong, like, so like I shifted, like I had to start giving myself time, prioritizing working out, prioritizing just some time away from everything digital, and just get outside and just get sun and just be away from all of it just for a little bit, 5 minutes even. Because I always say, like as business owners, as like the head of a household, like we're the captain of the ship. If we go down, the whole thing goes down. And if we're not prioritizing that time as leaders, as business owners, whatever, like it's going to negatively impact things, even if you don't necessarily see it right away.
It's again, it's so true. And the phrase you used, I say that all the time. Like if I can't give myself 15 minutes because something's going to collapse, then I've got bigger problems on my hands.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so true. It's it's not going to collapse. It's not going to implode. If there is something urgent, then 15 minutes is not going to, in the grand scheme of things, is not going to make the great deal of difference. But what will make the great deal of difference is that you giving yourself a bit of time to take a breather, to get yourself in the mindset, but like a better mindset, like a higher mindset, and how you then approach that emergency or that urgent situation. I promise you will be far more clearer, you'll be more confident, and you'll almost certainly get a better result from it. It feels, as entrepreneurs, it feels so counterintuitive, but it's not. Like, and when you start to live this way, like I started to see massive results in my business, and I wasn't even trying it. Like it was a case of I just needed it. I was so burnt out and just so tired of waking up and living in that way. And I was also very conscious that if I didn't make a change, then I may have a business on my hands, but I was almost certainly going to lose my family. I was going to lose everything else, and it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And so, Adrian, this has been fantastic. Great conversation. I think a lot of good key things people can start thinking about and implementing in their lives. Like all our guests, thankfully, have shared some amazing stuff. So if people want to get connected with you, learn more from you, where's the best place for them to go do that?
Yep. So I'm very active on Instagram. My handle is Adrian J Knight. Knight with K. And I'm very active with my stories. I tend to sort of show my morning, particularly like the morning from 4 a.m. all the way through, and give people insight into sort of what I'm doing. I also like to share, when I am feeling down or if I'm feeling anxious, it's, the reality of just being an entrepreneur, I guess. Instagram is by far the best way.
Awesome. Yeah. So make sure you connect with Adrian and continue to learn from him. But Adrian, again, thank you so much for being on the Elevate Media podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Media podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. See you in the next episode.